Hello guys, and glad to have you on board again today. Quite a lot to unpack because today is going to be a hell of a day. So let's get right into it. Yesterday's Fed interventions was quite stratospheric, and that's the least I could say. I mean, I haven't been looking at the entire thing, but just some kind of a recap. And actually, oh man, I don't know what the hell is doing Jerome Powell, but there is seriously quite some problems in here in terms of communications, in a way that even though he's trying to be as reassuring as possible, my immediate feeling regarding some specific sentences have been just, oh man, they're really rolling out of control. And in that perspective, as a personal investor, I didn't really felt like quite confident. So I don't know if this is a well done job so far, because once again, my personal feelings and the way I perceived this thing doesn't necessarily mean that I might be right or wrong. So I always need to make this thing more rational. So we're going to have a look at the same old indicators in here as our context analysis. So as we go unpacking the Fed and as we get into today's catalyst, which is just a massive stuff ahead, I suggest we go right into context analysis. So complex context, obviously, because a lot of subjective analysis in here regarding what's been said with the Fed. We're going to have a look at the yield curve, obviously, in here, because that's one of the many factors that we get to have a look at, but we'll get to this one slightly later. Right now, as I record this thing, the things are about German GDP slumping. It's absolutely staggering. I mean, we are going to get the US GDP today as well. So is it going to slump as much as expected, or even worse, or stuff like that? We're going to get jobless claims as well. So today, just itself, in terms of pure catalyst, is just one of big days. These are the major catalysts the market's having a look at right now. The unemployment and GDP. So we're going to get both into the same day. And if that wasn't just enough, we're going to add 30% of the NASDAQ publishing earnings release right after the closing bell. So it's not even at the opening bell, it's right at the close. So today is a massive volatile type of day. So obviously, beginners, stay the fuck away from these types of days. This is definitely not the easiest way for you to trade. Anyway, I tried hard, at least as much as possible, to get you prepared by yesterday evening, as I sent you a message right into Discord telling you that there would be quite an appropriate timing to sell, but just had to be an overnight trade, therefore really very complicated. I know some of beginners among the community cannot necessarily handle overnight trade because they feel very uncomfortable letting a trade open and go into sleep. So in that perspective, just be aware that sleeping is way more important than trading. So if you can handle trading overnight, just don't do it. All right, that's not that big of a deal. It's just that right now it's a little bit too late. When we're going to get to the charts, you'll see that prices have already started to fall. Not necessarily because we know what's going to happen. It's more that it's a risk management perspective. We'll see this one in a technical reading later on. Fear and greed index. Jesus motherfucker, what the hell have I done? All right, quite some problems in here. I'm going to have to pause. All right, that's better. Sorry about that. These things are really recorded in real time. It's just that the only thing I can do is actually pause the podcast recording. It's really that simple. So there's not going to be editing. I mean, you really see this as real life. I'm going to let this thing go, even if that's not pleasant for you to watch. Anyway, fear and greed index, as we have a look at, same thing as yesterday, or well, actually slightly rising at just a bit. Yesterday was 63 or 65, not that big of a deal. Still dealing with the same price area. Today is going to be a massive changer in terms of fear and greed perceptions or whatever. So tomorrow we're going to have a lot more to unpack, and these numbers probably going to change a lot. Yesterday's session, we'll quick look at it. Not that much to talk about regarding today. I mean, too much things to wait for. So yeah, yesterday is one of those days in which the NASDAQ is lifting up stocks, Dow Jones was lagging, and S&P 500 in between. Quite something we've got used to. Regarding stock indices, as you can see, Nikkei is falling. It's now breaking supports as we speak. That's exactly what I was expecting. So that's the reason why I got into short selling earlier today. My short selling activities have been made on the DAX as well, just like entering the NASDAQs. I've been reinforcing my S&P 500 and reinforcing my Nikkei because I already have existing trades on the Nikkei and the S&P 500. I just got in NASDAQ and DAX on top of them. So VIX itself still remains fairly low. Big questions regarding what's happening today. Either we're going to validate a lower high point, and in that perspective breaking the resistance and getting into territories. I mean, it's hard to figure out. We've got plenty of space to the upside when it comes to volatility. So are we going to burst it all out of control? Yes or no? Still fairly hard to answer that question. Regarding 30-year bonds, when we got a lot to talk about regarding the Fed, we had quite of a, even if I personally think that this was totally stratospherically stupid, this thing actually happened to calm down yields. But that's the reason why I personally think that the yields will never pop unless something totally unexpected just fucks it all up, because it tends to believe that no one just wants to fight the Fed. We're not believing him, but we not want to fight them. So in that perspective, no one's trading about yields, no one's taking the risks. Just people are just betting on anyway yields will go down forever, because that's what basically have been said yesterday. It's a totally no limit type of discussion that has been set out there. So it was basically, there's no limit in time, there's no limit in amounts. We just do whatever the fuck we want. As long as it doesn't work, we'll make it. Okay, so it's really, it doesn't work, but we're gonna make it work, and it's gonna take no matter how much and no matter how long. Great. Maybe you should just say that you're not necessarily doing you're doing it right. Maybe you should think about doing it differently. Maybe the fact that we're doing it for a decade now, you might have kind of a second thought about whether or not you want to use the same tools. So they're talking about broadening the sets of tools, of course, to an extent of we have no limits. So why the fuck won't we be buying stocks tomorrow? That's the big question we should wonder right now. Market doesn't have any boundary, any limit, and that is fairly dangerous. Okay, so we'll see about it. That's a very dangerous context. I cannot stress that enough. But anyway, I mean, that's the world we live in. We're looking for boundaries. Well, the day we're going to get them, it's not going to be pleasant. Anyway, dollar is still losing ground versus probably almost every currency but the NZD right now. GBP has taken the lead over Euro. That is somehow consolidating right now, even though it's made a slightly higher high yesterday with the Fed. GPY is on track right now, and that's a fairly pleasant stuff. As I see the Nikkei falling off a cliff, I suspect GPY to be an even more interesting currency within the next few days and weeks. So still have a lot of potential on USD GPY, but I guess we'll get to talk about this one on the weekly updates. In here we're supposed to do just intraday. Okay, so let's switch to our charts. Jesus, sorry, I was a little bit too late on switching the screens. Okay, so here it is. What to say? I mean, we're not going to get 15 minutes a day, 1 hour. It's too big of a day, so let's make it simple. All right, today is all about figuring out what the fuck is going to happen for our daily charts. So let's have a quick look at the daily chart though. Okay, our daily chart, and I suspect a very probable bearish engulfing structure. Yesterday was one of those trappy days. Yesterday's plan was quite simple. It was to say that we're on supportive area, and as long as it doesn't break, don't anticipate it. And it actually totally failed. We said it's going to break if we ever pull back to this trend line. Okay, we were right back there when we recorded earlier yesterday. And we said, if we fall back to this area, it's an inevitable breakdown. But if we don't be stupid enough to get yourself in a trap. And that's exactly what happened. It has been a trap all day long, trying to push, simply because we failed to break the support. But failed to break it yesterday doesn't mean we're not going to do it today. All right. And I would even say that with this type of structure right now, we do have an even more major high point that is lower than the previous one. And in that perspective, breaking out this trend line is just personally, I think, inevitable. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. It's just that that's what technical supports. But technicals are not the entire stuff. And mostly today is just that it's all about anything else but technicals. It's all going about GDP numbers, jobless numbers, which I think are really, really second stage compared to the heavy amounts of stocks publishing later today. So it's really a gamble right now. The trades I took are really all about that. But the reason I took them when we were right below resistance is because it provides a much better risk-reward ratio. So that was my plan. I prepared for it. That's the reason why I told you right by yesterday that I would be selling resistances. I didn't want to do it yesterday evening right after the Fed as the market were closing at the high. I definitely hate doing those stuff. That's the reason why I sent the message right into Discord telling you, all right, I'm going to wait for a bit because going overnight in here is fairly dangerous, and I'd rather like to see whatever the fuck I have earlier in the morning tomorrow. The problem is I had other stuff to take care of this morning, therefore I couldn't record earlier than that. But I still had a plan, and I gone into I gone into Twitter for the French users telling you them I was selling. So you're once again a little bit late on this one as the English community, but the plan was still there. You knew I wanted to sell, so I told you that I would be selling earlier in the morning. That's exactly what happened. I just wanted to see the Asian session consolidating or at least not moving. That's exactly what we've had, an absolutely uninteresting or consolidative Asian session, and as expected, actually, the European session is doubling down. So it's all now about the US. US is going to open about supportive areas once again. Yesterday they managed to save it, but somehow failed to confirm. I suspect today no one's going to buy. So no buyers on support means we're probably going to break them. So that's what technical supports, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily what's going to happen. So don't be too much deterministic today. It's absolutely stupid to think that things have to be this way or have to be this other way. It's definitely not how these games works, okay? I hope you really do understand this perspective, because if you don't, you're going to have quite a lot of troubles. Anyway, I think we've said more than enough, so let's go to conclusion. All right, so some of the information, technicals, fairly firmly bearish. We should break down the support. There's absolutely nothing, or it's like 90% chances that we break it. Regarding the technical structures, the consolidation, all of those things, the bearish signals, and all of those early technical activities all suggest that we're going to break the support. But today, too many catalysts down the road. That's the reason why this signal had to be anticipated. And it is really complicated for me to say that, because I hate teaching you to be aggressive. But this time, no other choices. Actually, that was the only possibility to profit from this thing, because it's actually selling closer to the resistance, and as we get closer to the support, simply put a stop loss, and that's a very cheap stop loss. That's the reason why yeah, if you're not into it, it's real too late. It's not about time to sell when we're right on support. So wait for the supports to break down. And eventually in that perspective, you get a breakout trade that might be showing up. That's personally where I will reinforce those positions. So I took some speculative positions on the resistance. My goal right now is to wait for the supports to be tested, broken down. And if that's actually what's happened, I'll reinforce, obviously. All right. So it's just, I have my previous entries on the previous historical highs, on at least for those who actually have been maintained, the SPX and the Nikkei, and for those in which I already have been stopped, which is DAX and Nasdaq, I got back in with a naked position. So will they sustain by the end of the day? I goddamn don't know. I hope so, but that's no certainty. So that being said, today is really one of those days on a watch and see type of approach. Who knows what we're going to get? It's real complicated, too much catalyst, and we got GDP, jobless numbers, and then the publications of earnings release. That's way too much to handle for beginners. So yeah, if you're thinking that this day is one of those days in which you really want to make money, then be aware that these things had to be prepared and should probably be done by now. Because if you're entering supportive areas with selling activities, you're mostly gambling. Because if you're right, you're going to get the breakdown. If you're wrong, you're going to take a loss. And you're basically getting 1/1 to risk-reward ratio. And that's not necessarily what a trader does. That's the reason why selling yesterday's resistance was fairly interesting. But that's one of the things I will eventually teach you right in the future. But all right, I'm really sorry. If you couldn't participate this trade, then just don't blame yourself. Don't blame me. It's no problem. These things happen. When the market gets real complicated, that's where experience makes a shit ton of difference. Anyway, we'll see what the fuck we have by tomorrow. There's probably going to be a lot to talk about. And in the meantime, I wish you guys a pleasant day. you.